Ever find yourself pacing around your living room, like mentally rearranging all your furniture? Or maybe you get lost in a daydream so vivid it feels like you're actually there.
I do that all the time.
Right. Well, that, my friend, is the power of mental representation in action. It's our mind's incredible ability to engage with things that aren't physically present, to create entire worlds and experiences within the theater of our own minds.
It's wild when you really think about it. Like, how do we pull that off?
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We're going to be exploring the work of phenomenologist Eduard Marbach, who, let me tell you, was obsessed with consciousness and how it shapes our mental representations.
I've always found his perspective so refreshing, especially compared to some of the more traditional cognitive science approaches.
Totally. He wasn't just interested in the mechanics of how our brains process information. He wanted to understand what it's actually like to have these thoughts and experiences, to explore the subjective feeling of consciousness.
Right, that first-person perspective. It's like, instead of just studying the hardware of a computer, he wanted to understand the software, the programs that make the whole thing come to life.
100%.
Hmm.
And Marbach believed that the key to understanding this inner world of mental representations lay in introspection, that inward reflection on our own thoughts and feelings. He argued that we can learn so much just by paying close attention to how our own minds work, by really tuning into those subtle nuances of experience.
Which makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, who knows more about what it's like to be you than you?
Exactly. And get this, one of his core ideas is that even activities like imagining that delicious slice of pizza you're craving or reminiscing about your last birthday party aren't actually separate from perception itself. He argues they're actually modifications of it.
Wait, so you're saying that when I'm daydreaming about winning the lottery, my mind is essentially using the same tools it uses to perceive the real world?
You got it. It's like our minds have this incredible perception toolkit. And whether we're interacting with tangible objects or conjuring up imaginary scenarios, we're still using those same fundamental tools.
Okay, my mind is officially blown, so how does that even work?
Well, Marbach would say it all comes down to this concept called intentionality. It's basically the directedness of our awareness toward an object. So let's say you're picturing yourself relaxing on a beach somewhere tropical.
Yeah.
Your mind is actively engaging with that idea of a beach, right?
Right. Palm trees, ocean waves, the works.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Your mind isn't just pulling up some generic image of a beach. It's drawing on your own personal experiences, your memories, your desires, to create a unique representation that's meaningful to you.
So it's more like my mind is creating a custom-designed beach experience based on my own personal preferences.
Precisely. And this is where Marbach makes some really insightful distinctions between different forms of mental representation, like imagining and remembering. When we imagine something, we're engaging in what he calls neutralized perception.
Neutralized. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it means that even though we can picture something vividly in our minds, like that giant ice cream sundae we were talking about earlier, there's still a part of us that knows it's not actually there in front of us. We're not trying to fool ourselves into thinking it's real.
Which is probably a good thing for my waistline.
Right. But when it comes to remembering, there's this inherent belief woven into the experience. When you recall that amazing concert you went to last month or that incredible meal you had last week, your mind is actively saying, yes, you were there. This really happened. It's like our memories have this built-in stamp of authenticity.
So it's not just that we're recalling an event, it's that we're recalling it with the underlying belief that it actually occurred.
Exactly. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of Marbach's work, his analysis of pictures.
Pictures? You mean like photographs?
Exactly. Because if you think about it, the act of looking at a photograph and understanding what it represents is actually a pretty strange mental activity.
Now that you mention it, yeah, it is kind of weird. I mean, we're looking at a flat piece of paper with some ink on it, but somehow our minds are able to see past that and perceive the scene or the people depicted in the image.
It is wild. And it all boils down to this incredible interplay between actual perception, seeing the physical photograph itself, and mental representation, our mind's ability to interpret that image and understand what it represents.
So it's like our minds are holding these two realities at the same time. The reality of the physical photo and the reality of what the photo depicts.
Precise.
Which makes me think, is that what makes photos so powerful? That they bridge this gap between the tangible and the imagined?
It's definitely a big part of it, that's for sure. And here's the thing, this interplay between perception and mental representation isn't limited to single static images like photographs. Think about reading a captivating novel.
Mm.
Even though the author might not describe every single detail, our minds automatically start filling in the blanks,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, absolutely. Suddenly, I'm not just reading words on a page, I'm transported to another world. I can see the characters, I can hear their voices, I can practically feel the cobblestones beneath my feet. It's incredible.
It really is. And it's all thanks to our mind's remarkable ability to weave together these threads of mental representation,
Yeah.
to combine our perceptions with our imaginations and create these rich, dynamic experiences.
It's like we're all carrying around these incredibly powerful mental movie studios in our heads, complete with elaborate sets, costumes, and special effects. And Marbach had a name for this too, right? Something like reiterative representing.
You got it.
Uh,
He argued that we don't just represent things in our minds, we represent the act of representing itself.
Okay, now that one makes my brain hurt a little. So what you're saying is that our minds are capable of not only imagining things, but also imagining the act of imagining those things.
Exactly.
Wow. We are strange and wonderful creatures, aren't we?
That's for sure. And the more we delve into this world of mental representation, the more we uncover about the incredible complexity and flexibility of human consciousness.
I can't wait to see where this deep dive takes us next.
Okay, so we've established our minds are basically these amazing inner studios capable of whipping up all sorts of vivid representations. But Marbach also talks about this other layer, and it's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. Even when we're totally engrossed in a daydream or a memory, there's still this part of us that's anchored to the present moment. It's like my minds have this split-screen ability that we're not always conscious of.
It's like having one foot firmly planted in reality while the other one is off exploring all these fantastical landscapes in our minds. And it makes me wonder, is that what separates a really vivid daydream from, say, a hallucination? Is it that anchor to reality that Marbach keeps talking about?
Precisely. In dreams or hallucinations that tether to our immediate perceptions to the here and now, it kind of weakens. And those lines between what we think is real and what we're imagining, they get blurry. The world we're creating internally, it starts to feel as real as the actual world around us, which can be a little unnerving.
So basically, in our everyday mental representations, there's this underlying understanding, almost like a gut feeling that's saying, okay, this amazing five-course meal exists in my mind right now, but I haven't actually tasted a single bite, and my stomach is rumbling, so maybe I should do something about that. Exactly. And this whole idea of being grounded in the here and now brings us to another one of Marbach's big ideas. The I, that sense of self, the me, that's doing all this imagining and remembering and perceiving. It's like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure all the instruments, the perceptions, the representations are coming together harmoniously to create the symphony of your experience.
But if the I is the conductor, what exactly is the orchestra playing? I mean, what's the real content of these mental representations? What are they actually made of?
Good question. Marbach argues that mental representations always involve presenting an object in a certain light. It could be a real object or something totally fictional, but the key is that it's presented from a specific perspective, highlighting certain features, creating a particular experience for the eye that's doing the representing.
So it's not just about conjuring up a generic image of, say, a sunflower, right? It's about presenting that sunflower in a way that's meaningful to me. Maybe I'm picturing it with the light of a summer sunset or surrounded by a field of wildflowers, each detail adding another layer to the experience.
That's it exactly. The way we choose to present an object in our minds, the specific details we amplify, the emotions we associate with it, that's what gives our mental representations their richness and depth.
It's like we're creating these intricate mental dioramas, each one imbued with its own unique atmosphere, its own significance, based on our personal experiences and memories. But even so, there must be some difference between these internal representations and actually experiencing something in the real world, right?
You're right, there's a big difference. In actual perception, we're directly interacting with the object. We can experience its texture, its weight, its smell, all those sensory details that bring it to life.
Like we can walk around it, touch it, fully immerse ourselves in its physical presence.
But with mental representation, there's always this bit of distance, a kind of as-ifness to the experience. It's like we're viewing the world through a mental filter.
So no matter how realistically I imagine biting into a juicy burger, it's not going to satisfy my real-world hunger pangs.
I'm afraid not. There's a fundamental difference between the immediacy of perception, that direct contact with reality, and the mediated nature of mental representation. And because of that difference, that inherent distance, there's always going to be a certain level of, let's call it indeterminacy, when it comes to the content of our mental imagery.
Indeterminacy. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, when you see like a real life pineapple, you perceive all its details, its shape, its texture, even that spiky top. But if you just close your eyes and imagine a pineapple, those details, they might be a little fuzzy, a little less defined.
It's like the difference between watching a movie in HD and then trying to remember it a few days later. Some scenes are crystal clear, but others are more like hazy impressions.
That's a great way to put it. Mental representations, they capture the essence, the gist of something, but they're not perfect replicas. They're more like impressionistic paintings. Evocative, but a little open to interpretation.
Which is kind of cool, right? It means our own unique perspectives, our individual experiences, can shape the content of those representations. Our minds are constantly remixing and reimagining, putting our own skin on the world we create in our heads.
That's what makes mental representations so powerful. They're not just static copies, they're dynamic, flexible, constantly evolving. And this flexibility is key to our ability to daydream, to imagine new possibilities, even to create works of art.
So it's less like our minds are hard drives storing fixed files, and more like they're constantly writing and rewriting, editing and remixing based on our experiences.
It's this active, dynamic aspect of mental representation that highlights the creativity of human consciousness. We're
Yeah.
not just passively absorbing information, we're actively shaping it, molding it with our minds.
It's like we're all artists at heart, constantly painting and reinterpreting the world around us through the lens of our own unique perspective. But this creative process is not just happening on an individual level, right?
Yeah.
It has social implications too.
Exactly. By understanding how our minds represent the world, we can start to understand how other minds might do the same. And that opens up all sorts of possibilities for empathy, for communication, for building bridges of understanding across different perspectives.
It's like we're trying to decipher a secret code, the code of consciousness. And the more we learn, the better we become at understanding each other and navigating this complex world we share. But Marbach doesn't stop there. He also delves into something called implicit consciousness, which sounds a little like something out of a sci-fi novel. What's going on beneath the surface of our awareness? What's lurking in the shadows of our minds?
Ah, yes. Implicit consciousness. It's all about those mental processes that are humming along beneath the surface of our awareness, silently influencing how we experience and interact with the world.
It's like the stage crew, working tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure the play goes off without a hitch, even though the audience never sees them. They're the unsung heroes of our mental theater.
That's a great analogy. And Marbach suggests that this implicit consciousness is especially important for something we often take for granted, recognizing familiar objects.
Okay, so you're saying that when I walk into my kitchen and instantly know that's my coffee maker,
Yeah.
without a moment's hesitation, implicit consciousness is playing a part behind the scenes.
Exactly. You're not consciously going through a mental checklist. Let's say it's got a carafe, a filter basket, that weird stain I haven't quite identified. Yep, that's definitely my coffee maker. It's more immediate than that. It's an instant sense of recognition, a feeling of familiarity that arises from those implicit memories.
So Marbach is arguing that this feeling of I know this coffee maker
Yeah.
is based on a whole bunch of past perceptions that I'm not even aware of. It's like my mind has this mental slideshow of every time I've ever seen that coffee maker from different angles at different times of day, even though I'm not consciously telling it to do that.
You got it. It's like your mind is constantly running these lightning fast comparisons in the background, checking your current perception against all those stored representations. And when it finds a match, bam, you get that spark of recognition.
Wow, so even recognizing something as basic as my coffee maker, it's like this whole hidden world of mental activity that we're usually totally oblivious to. It makes you wonder what else is going on in those brains of ours.
Right. And Marbach, he takes us on this whole other fascinating detour. He starts talking about how this implicit consciousness, it's not just about recognizing things, it's also deeply connected to language.
So that's a connection I wouldn't have made.
Yeah.
So how does our ability to use words, especially when we're talking about specific objects, how does that tie into this idea of mental representation?
Well, a lot of people think that language is like the main way we make sense of the world, but Marbach, he flips that on its head. He says, actually, it's the other way around.
You're saying our thoughts are actually shaping our language, not the other way around.
Exactly. Marbach saw language more as a tool to express those mental representations we're building in our minds. We can use a word, let's say tree, because we already have this mental grasp of what that concept represents, even if we've never seen that exact tree before.
That's making me think of language as this bridge between those inner worlds in our minds, those thoughts, and then the outer world that we share with everyone else. It's like we're taking these really complex representations, all those images and sensations, and we're finding a way to condense them into these packets of sounds, words that allow us to communicate those ideas.
I like that, the bridge analogy. And that bridge building, it depends on implicit consciousness. When you say a word like tree, your mind, it's not just accessing a dictionary definition, it's calling upon all sorts of personal experiences, memories, emotions you associate with trees.
So even a simple phrase like, wow, look at that sunset, there are all these layers of implicit meaning baked right in.
Absolutely. The words are like triggers, instantly activating all these mental representations. And because we share that capacity for language, we can tap into a common ground of meaning.
It's like we've all got access to this massive library of shared mental representations. And language is how we check out a book, how we share those experiences. But if we didn't have that ability to form those representations in the first place, language wouldn't be nearly as powerful or meaningful, right?
Exactly. That ability not just to see what's in front of us, but to represent it internally, to make it our own, that's what makes us human. It's at the heart of how we learn, how we connect, how we create meaning in the world.
It's like we're carrying around entire universes in our minds, and language is the key that unlocks those universes, allowing us to share them and connect in ways we never could before.
What a beautiful way to put it. And it really emphasizes how interconnected we are. We're never truly alone with our thoughts because those thoughts, they're always mingling and weaving together with the thoughts of others through this shared language.
This whole deep dive has been mind-blowing. We've gone from rearranging furniture in our minds to unraveling the mysteries of consciousness, implicit memory, and the power of language. It's amazing how these seemingly abstract philosophical ideas actually have such profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our place in the world.
It really speaks to the power of phenomenology, that approach of really paying attention to our lived experience to see how these everyday activities like imagining or remembering can reveal so much about the human mind.
Absolutely. Eduard Marbach might have been exploring these ideas decades ago, but his insights about consciousness, mental representation, and perception, they're just as relevant today as they ever were.
I think that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating. It's a journey that each of us can take. The more we learn about our minds, the more we discover about the world around us and our place in it.
And who knows what other incredible insights are waiting to be uncovered. So to our listeners, we encourage you to keep those mental gears turning, to keep asking those big questions, and to never stop exploring the amazing world of the human mind.